all of these things that can absolutely screw a landlord, but there's not much that could actually hurt a tenant who doesn't pay.
Well, I don't know if you've watched the news at all in the last couple of weeks here, but there is now people striking in Toronto on paying rent. And more people are just simply not paying their rent. And they just can't afford to.
No one is out there picketing or striking at the grocery store. What's called when you fill your gas and then run, pumping?
I know.
I think it's called a drive off. I accidentally drove off one time. I was talking on the phone, to be honest with you, which you're also not supposed to do. Probably because it increases the likelihood of you driving.
I was smoking a dart, talking on the phone,
just
stealing gas.
Dart on the phone, just doing everything wrong. Yeah, so I just drove off, and I didn't think anything of it. I got a call from the police a day later.
Yeah.
Or 2 days later. And the police were kind of like, honestly, like, there's not a whole lot we can do about this. But, like, are you going to go back and pay? I'd like to be able to tell them. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I'll go back and pay. It's just crazy that, like, I drove off on, like, $20 worth of gas. And the cops came for me.
Yeah.
And every time someone doesn't pay rent, what do the cops say? It's a tenancy issue. It's not our issue.
Tenancy issue.
So someone cannot pay $2,000
thousands of dollars.
Yeah. And it's just like, oh,
when I was broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich habits.
Man, this week was a battering ram, like just terrible. This week,
busy?
man. No. I mean, well,
Oh,
yeah,
right.
busy, but man, I literally locked in 2 mortgages.
Oh God.
Just before this rate increase, because I was like, man, I think there's a decent chance there's going to be this rate increase here. So I locked in a couple, and I was talking to my sister, and I'm like, you maybe don't need to lock in the other one.
Yeah.
And of course, almost. It was literally like 3 days later. But, man, I want to get your thoughts on this. I'm getting so frustrated with the federal government, but it's also making me realize, to some degree, we have in Canada almost a government manufactured economy. Right? Like,
yes.
We don't actually manufacture anything. We don't really use our resources to the extent that we should.
Yeah.
We don't innovate. So, like, that whole startup sector, whatever you want to call it, like, we don't have those traditional anchors to our economy.
Yes.
What do we have is a lot of government spending.
Yeah.
And that's a huge part of our GDP.
Yeah.
We have a heavy reliance on real estate prices going up.
Yeah.
And we bring in a lot of people.
Yeah.
Most recently, in recent history, bringing in people
As a whole, we have been, yeah.
Those are the 3 things. Which one of those are actually real? Like, the government just spending money like they're going nuts. Real estate prices that at times in certain markets seem really inflated, certainly relative to
starting to be all
income.
the time.
And then just like, well, let's just bring in more people.
Yeah.
Like, these are our 3 economic drivers.
Yeah.
That doesn't bode super well. And then we get into these screwed up situations where, like, all right, the government overspent. I mean, obviously hindsight's 2020, but clearly how we handled the COVID situation was not good. Wasn't good, and that's a big part of why we're in this situation. And then they doubled down with more spending. So then we have all this inflation. And it's like, oh, well, shit, now we've got this problem. We got all this inflation. How do we try to tackle that? Well, and I know the Bank of Canada is not, lockstep with the federal government by any stretch. They're arm's length, they're independent. However, they've got one mandate, which is to keep inflation low. And they've got one tool to do it, the overnight rate.
Yeah.
So they're like, well, inflation's running out of control because of what the federal government has done in large part. Obviously, there's some other factors too, but man, the federal government deserves a big chunk of the blame for this inflation situation.
Yeah.
So they just turn the dial, which basically means if you have bought a house in the last 3 years, if you bought a house between 12 and 36 months ago, or by some poor coincidence, you're up for renewal here currently,
which a lot of people are,
all of the mistakes of the federal government are going to be borne by you.
Yes.
Like, you are going to be the people that bear the brunt of these poor federal, spending policies.
Yes.
But then there's this thing because of all of this inflation,
yes,
no one here in Canada is willing to work these historically lower paying jobs. In fact,
just can't afford to.
In fact, like, you can barely afford to be a nurse, a teacher, like a lot of these things because of this inflation.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, we have to bring in a bunch of people to work these jobs that no Canadian can justify anymore because it doesn't provide the Western, standard of living that we're used to or convinced that we deserve or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So we have to bring in all these more people that then
Perpetuate the problem.
yeah, if you bring more people to a country, they spend.
Yes.
And as a result, the economy hums along. So
Yes.
while we're squeezing all these, people who have bought homes in the last 36 months, we're just squeezing them. We're not getting the movement on inflation because we just bring in more people to increase the spending power. And then you're just like, well, why doesn't the government intervene in this housing market? Does the government really want affordable housing? They just don't. Because again, like we talked about this before, that is a huge source of revenue for them.
Mm-hmm.
So their solution is like, well, we can't really give back the tax money and we can't really, drop fees at the provincial or municipal level. None of these levels of government want to do anything that takes money out of their pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Their solution is just keep giving us that money and we'll keep spending it out on the other end.
Yeah.
Which just further perpetuates the problem.
Yeah.
Like I think we're in a really stupid cycle, and anyone listening to this, we don't want to get into politics too much, but if you vote in your upcoming elections for the status quo, something is seriously, seriously wrong with you.
Yes. 100%. I agree on all these things. We've talked about it before, and I've always kind of screamed about how we don't have anything else for our economy except for bringing in people.
Yeah.
And the thing, it's smart in a lot of ways because bringing people is human capital, and they also bring their money from other countries, which is
Totally.
really important. And that's really the end goal when you're exporting a product, is to bring in the money from other countries. And you're doing that also by bringing in people, but you're also getting the capital, the human capital.
But also, like we're saying right now, we're trying to have, contracting monetary policy. We're saying we need less money being out there spent. So, you and I
Less
are
of our
both
Canadian money. We want to bring in that external dough now, for inflation, we want to have less money out there as a whole, but the inflation, if it can be managed, additionally, if you can bring in more money from other countries, and that would be through selling resources. And so now's a good time, would be really helpful for the country to make a push on selling some resources to bring in some outside capital. So we're not running off of our own debt to have this. And yeah, it's a very weird situation that we're in because additionally, like you said, for people who live here locally, it's hard to maintain the life that we want. But then the people that come to work the jobs are ultimately receiving the money to be able to live the lifestyle. Additionally, because we're so pro on immigration, they receive a lot of benefits that sometimes can put them at an advantage in comparison to somebody who's born and raised here and local.
Well, I don't even know about that. Like,
Oh, 100%.
and-
No, that's 100%. That you see it. They get rent subsidies, job placements. There's all sorts, there's cash bonuses. I have immigrants that will offer me more money than the rent's being posted at because it's covered for them.
interesting. Okay.
Right. And then there's also the loopholes that people pull where it's like, when you're hiring immigrants, you can get payroll subsidies. Right. Or there's people who will purchase their way into the country. And so they're able to, again, you're bringing in cream of the crop. So they're going to be at a higher status level than people locally.
Yeah.
And so it makes it a very difficult environment. And so people who get the payroll subsidies, like I've seen companies that hire a ton of people, bring them in, and then use the payroll subsidies to basically give more money to the they work together. They basically look, we're going to get all these government subsidies for running an immigrant-based company that brings in a bunch of people, and then we sprinkle the subsidies across all of our groups of people. These are groups of immigrants, so they get way more money, and they can do shit for way cheaper too, because they're like 40% of my payroll is covered.
Oh yeah.
So I can underbid you on jobs here, and or additionally, any money that I do get from the government, they'll spread it across their guys. So the guys are making more money than somebody in the equivalent position.
Right.
in
Yeah. No.
comparison.
I know what you mean.
So
yeah.
it becomes a very difficult situation
Yeah.
for both. At the end of the day, as an immigrant, it's super tough. And I'm not saying like anti-immigrant at all. I'm very for it. Obviously, my family immigrated. But I'm just saying the system's gotten kind of wonky and flawed. And in times like this where people can't afford things, they're more inclined to do things to get extra money, whatever it may be, or to kind of push the limits or look for the loopholes, and trying to use those now to stay afloat and stay ahead of the curve.
It's also, it's tricky, because it's a timing thing, and we do have this problem where we have a population that's not, we don't have a high population, and we're very spread out, and it's hard for us to finance all of the infrastructure and all the public services that we continue to rely on, and whether or not that's a good solution moving forward, I personally don't think it is. If I think it would be great if the people that came here were allowed to go out and For example, say we had some private healthcare here, like more private
Yeah.
healthcare than we have now.
Yep.
Then if you brought over, doctors and people, like they could open and expand their own healthcare practices and bring their own people over and alleviate some of the pressure on the public sector healthcare.
It ultimately push prices down, I think, too, over time.
I think so as well, and that's gonna, that'll never play well with the public because as Canada, we like, banging our drum about how great it is to have free healthcare, even though it's trash. Like, look around, our healthcare system here is just it's
Free healthcare
trash
is
right
more
now.
of, I think, a control thing than an actual.
And that's just one example. Like, I just think if we, bring people over here, let's empower them to start like real businesses and, add real value and innovate and do these things rather than set up these programs that are, again, just government handing out money and just floating these things that aren't necessarily fundamentally
Government
sound in their own right.
keeps control that way. The systems only
Yeah.
run in that direction. Now, hey guys, I just wanted to interject for a second and discuss the wildfires. Our hearts are with anyone who's been affected by it. It's a terrible situation. But on the flip side, we have received some messages from home builders and people in industry that are trying to help out and help get the word out. And so if you or anyone you know maybe works, I guess, with families or insurance companies, or you have something you want to provide, you can message us and we'll try and help link some people up here. We have a good platform. A ton of us are in the real estate world. And yeah, I just like, I don't know what the exact direction is. And so if there's someone who's like, hey, we need home builders to start signing on. I've had a few that have reached out that are like, we can get houses up in 6 to 8 months. Like, we're ready to start building some of these places, but they're struggling to get in contact with the people that need them. So if you can reach out, just I guess shoot me a direct message, and let us know if you can help out, or if you know someone that can,
or even if you're seeing like the platform or how people are getting connected between these things.
Yeah.
Because I had someone reach out and I didn't know where to direct them. I go, I don't know, like social media, because he's got a unit coming available. So it would be nice. I'm sure there's some things getting in place. If you know of them, or if you have someone who might need a connection. Yeah.
So
Fire
anyways,
message.
thanks guys. Enjoy the pod. I kind of want to change here a little bit on the same note regarding, because again, we're talking about real estate and affordability and everything is insane. And we had made a post about the Toronto rents and like how whatever the rent was like broke an average of $3,000 or whatever it was at that point in time. That was earlier this year. And I commented on there and I said, at what point do people simply stop paying rent? I'm not sure if you saw a comment. I've gotten a fair number of replies. People are like, this is so ignorant. Why the hell would people stop paying rent? Well, I don't know if you've watched the news at all in the last couple of weeks here, but there is now people striking in Toronto on paying rent. And more people are just simply not paying their rent. And they just can't afford to. So this is specific. There's a building where I don't know exactly how many tenants have now stopped paying rent, but they're actually, and the more people they interviewed, the more people are like, yeah, I'm jumping on the bandwagon. But in this building, whatever, massive complex in Toronto, they received kind of 2 annual increases of 5% each. And the reason being is in Toronto, you can't go more than 2%, but they were able to do so because if you have basically an exorbitant amount of repairs and maintenance to be done, you can apply and I think get an extra, it's called an AGI, so you can get a larger rent increase.
Provided you do the work.
Provided you do the work. And so they did, and they got those rent increases. And so it was a couple $100s on a lot of the rents. And so people now are literally just striking and not paying their rents. Like it's such a touchy thing now, because like, of course, these people are receiving eviction notices, but like, what's going to happen from this? Because like,
this is what I thought about municipal taxes. Like, we're getting so gouged, and as a landlord, it's really frustrating to be like, wow, everything else is allowed to go up except for us, right? Like everything else can increase, and no one is out there picketing or striking at the grocery store, right? No one's out there striking at the gas station. No one's out there striking at basically.
You have no choice because you have to give your money at that point in time to receive the product. Whereas with a space, when you rent a space, once you're in there, there's no one physically like maintaining the fact that you then have to leave. And
people need to be doing like what's called when you fill your gas and then run, pump and I can't remember. I worked at a gas station.
Pump and run?
I should know what this is called. What's this called? Pump and
I know.
I think it's called a drive off. Anyway, like, why aren't people just doing that? You're like, you know what? I'm tired of this, or like, I
Well,
guess
a
a
lot
lot
of-
of people are probably stealing from grocery stores.
The problem with that is, well, you have to have your plate off. You'd have to have a plate off
Yeah.
your car, and then additionally, they approve you. You know, every single person that when you go to pay, if you pay at pump or you try to pump without paying, they have to click go, and they check the camera, they check and see if you have a plate, and then they click go.
Oh, interesting.
That's what it is now and a lot of times they'll send you inside. A lot of places more and more like you have to pay inside.
But here's the other thing: like I accidentally drove off one time. I was talking on the phone, to be honest with you, which you're also not supposed to do.
Yeah,
probably because it increases the
This guy
likelihood
was
of you
smoking a
driving
dart,
wrong.
talking on the phone,
Just
stealing
having a
gas.
dart on the phone, just doing everything wrong, throwing matches. And yeah, so I just drove off, and I didn't think anything of it. I got a call from the police a day later,
Yeah.
or 2 days later, like, hey, we pulled your plate.
What
You
the
didn't
hell
pay.
are you
And I'm like,
doing?
oh my gosh, like I honestly just totally forgot.
Yeah.
And the police were kind of like, honestly, like there's not a whole lot we can do about this. But like, are you going to go back and pay? I'd like to be able to tell them. I'm like, yeah, absolutely, I'll go back and pay. It's just crazy that like I drove off on like $20 worth of gas, and the cops came for me.
Yeah.
And every time someone doesn't pay rent, what do the cops say? It's a tenancy issue. It's not
That's
our
a tenancy issue.
So someone cannot pay $2,000 in rent.
Thousands of dollars.
Yeah. And it's just like, oh, well, there you go. But I thought about this, we just get demonized, and we have no pull, and everything else can go up and up and up, and no one says boo. But landlords, man, like here in Halifax, we've only been getting 2%. It's going to be raised to 5%. Yeehaw. The one thing we could do in theory is just not pay our property taxes, right? If en masse,
That's a game I don't want to play.
well, that's the thing. Like, but it's also because
They will take
we
your
abide
pro-
by
they
the
will take your
rules and like
property,
all of
Chandler.
these things. But yeah, even if it's just like a delayed thing, because you know how it is for them to tax sale of property. It's very hard. It takes a long, long time. Even just did it, for 12 months, we're not going to pay. And let's see how much, the city sweats for those 12 months without that revenue
You
coming
need
in.
so many people.
Exactly. You need a lot of people to do it.
So the other thing I want to point out about this company, I dug into it a little bit because of course the article was written in a way to be like, they made this much. They have a cap rate of 4% and they're making a net income of 50%. So they're making a fortune on these places.
How can you have a net income of 50% and only cap rate of 4%? That doesn't much make sense. But
Well, no, the cap rate's like, you know what I mean? Like you cap, because your net income is not going to, like for them, they're not going to rate in their interest. It's going to be EBITDA. So there's no interest on that. So it's going to be
right, I see what you're saying.
if they're making $100 million, their operating expenses are $50 million.
Right,
So they make $50 million, but it only works up to a cap of 4. So they have 8,800 units. They collected $97 million in rent. That averages out to $915 a month per unit with predominantly Ontario units. And they never mentioned that. I'm like, their average rent is like $1,000. It's the same thing. I went to a Killam presentation and they said the same thing. They brought up their average rent and it was like $1,160. Like, yeah, our new average rent right now is $2,400, but it also costs us $600,000 a door to build a building.
Yeah.
So we're losing money on those buildings at $2,600.
Yeah.
But our average is still this.
Yeah. And then every news article will be the like, average rents have increased. It's like, yeah, because all you did was you took a quick Google search of what's being rented currently. You didn't take the summary of the
where
other
most of the leases are
97%
locked
of
in.
people that are locked in. Yeah.
It's the other thing was if you on their balance sheet, they spent 8% last year on maintenance and repairs. So rents went up 5, but 8% of that $97 million was towards maintenance and repairs. So it's like, I don't know. And at a cap rate of 4%, they show their new debt. They're signing on at 7%. So they're actually not cash flowing on the buildings. Like they're taking a loss.
Yeah.
And their realized loss at the end of the year was like negative $130 million.
Yeah.
Like
so
it's-
again, like,
Because all their properties, as well, with interest rates going up, all the properties go down in value. Every single one. So it's just, again, the article didn't say any of that. I just ended up reading their income sheet just to kind of see what all was going on because they just took out the like 50% net income. It's like, yeah, okay, let's just see here what the actual net income looks like and what they're actually doing into this. Anyways, my bigger thing is it's just interesting now, and I really don't. As the second I heard that, I was like, how's that going to work for like mortgage payments and shit? Like, you're just gonna call the bank and be like, hey man, like literally no one's paying rent.
mhm.
I don't think they're gonna give a shit.
No. Of course they're not going. Like, it's
Like nobody's gonna care. Insurance is not gonna give a crap. They're gonna be like, we don't get like the second you miss your insurance payment, you have no coverage.
yeah.
And then your bank's gonna be like, you
then you're
need to have
breaching your
coverage.
mortgage. Yeah.
Like it's anyways. Like I said, I just wanted to. I
Well,
kind
this
of
is
pointed
the
out
thing.
because I
There are
remember.
all of these things that can absolutely screw a landlord.
Yeah.
But there's not much that could actually hurt a tenant who doesn't pay. There really isn't. Because obviously these tenants are taking the calculated risk of, oh, the tenancy board's not going to get through all of this.
No, and the
There's
media and the general public are going to back you up.
Yeah.
Because it seems like the thing to do.
And I'm not saying that like we don't need a radical readjustment of the housing market, including the rental market.
Yes.
What I'm saying is if each one of those tenants targeted their ire towards the government that is not approving projects quick enough, that has played a huge role in this mass inflation, that has taken, I think, time and time again, like just bad policy on housing and government spending, that is where your anger should be, directed. But it's directed towards landlords because they're right there. They're in the media. They're, oh my gosh, these landlords just, making so much money. It's not true. The government makes way more money on that property than the owner.
I'm telling you, I think my idea of if with a rental statement or like some
Break
sort
it
of
down.
sheet, when people
Yeah.
sign their rent, you're like paying $1,400, $250 is taxes, $100 is insurance. You break them all
Yeah.
down. I think people might have a different perspective and they'd be like, this much is interest. This is repairs and maintenance. There's this much money that's actually going towards equity pay down or like any,
Yeah.
and then this is the actual pure profit, which is 4%. Like it's like, they'd be like, oh, like that's not like $2,000. Okay, they're making $80.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
isn't such a sexy model for all the work and the people and everything that goes in the background.
Yeah.
It is just the numbers are enormous because there's huge properties and things like that.
It would also be great if you could do it month to month and then you'd be like, filter for the bathroom fan, minus $80. Because then they'll be like, oh yeah, that time I called them and they had to get the filter for the bathroom fan.
I lost
That
money
was $80.
month.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I do think it would matter just because the lack of awareness. I don't know. I feel like we're just here,
We're winding
these
down, but
apologists
I'm
for landlords, but
I'm going to keep this wine going. I just got a quote for insurance.
fill me another
for-
glass of wine, baby.
For 68 units renovated. 68, 36, 47. 68 units. For 68 renovated units, how much do you think insurance costs per year?
68 renovated units across how many buildings?
8.
8 buildings? Oh man, 8 buildings. 68. I would say you're $64,000.
73,000. That's basically, it averages out to $100 a month per unit.
Yeah.
That kind of blew my mind. That
Well,
$100 each month is just going towards insurance, which I've never made a claim on, and you never really get to make a claim on.
Insurance right now is basically if you're
And the
small
deductible is
scale-
enormous.
Yeah, if you're a small scale building, which is like say 6 to 15 units, it's $8,000 a building. That's why I was like, how many buildings you got? You got 8 buildings. That's about $64,000. Yeah,
That's
a little higher, yeah, because they're all around like 8,600, right? So yeah,
It's ludicrous. It's actually insanity.
I was doing. You were probably doing this as well. My 3-year operating statements on a building.
yeah.
And just looking at how everything went up, you really see it there. You're like,
It's psycho.
damn, man. My first year operating statement had insurance. I think it was, so this was 2021, 22.
Mm-hmm.
I think my insurance was like $3,400. And then it was like $6,300. And then it was $7,300. Now it's like
Did you make a claim?
$8,700. No, of course not.
Because it would be
I've never made a claim.
it'd be double that.
Yeah.
It-
Never made a claim on anything. But, and then you see, oh, my lawn care went from this to this to this. My snow removal went from this to this to this. My property tax went from this to this to this. And all you just watch them go up. You're like, oh yeah, that all tracks. And so I take, what do? I take the rent. I move it any chance I can. Like someone leaves, full rent. Right?
I feel like it's like they're in a time right now where there's no eyes on them, so they just do like these insurance companies and places like they continue to increase it because like, well, rents are going up a bunch, and so we know we can squeak this in because this is how much money extra that they're making, and so they'll just say okay to it because the extra rent's covering it. Because that's how I'm stomaching it. I'm just like, I did the math. And I was like, oh my god, if I got the rents that I had projected 2 years ago, these buildings wouldn't work.
Yeah.
It's only
Yeah.
because rents went up about 60% in the last 3 years that this works, but I'm not really making any more money. It shows a larger number, but all the expenses are just chewing it up. And I'm like, oh, these companies, insurance companies, are so big, like they'll be able to project exactly like, okay, rents are up an average of this. The average person, the average landlord or business can handle this much more
Yeah, we can
costs on
squeeze this a
insurance,
little bit.
so
Yeah.
we can squeeze this up this amount to actually get them. Like it's
Yeah, and
insanity.
their stakeholders, their shareholders require a larger profit every single year, right? Regardless of what the economy is doing. This is the thing with the banks too. Everyone, no one is out there picketing and protesting the bank and refusing fees or whatever. And
Mhm.
think about this scenario that's going on right now. Everyone is feeling tighter.
Mhm.
What's the one institution that, yeah, they have some fixed products, but they're not losing money on those fixed products, really, right? They're still making money on those fixed products.
Banks?
Yeah.
Yeah, banks
Like
insurance.
they would argue that, well, because money's depreciated in value, there's all this inflation. They're actually, if they have an interest rate that's lower than inflation, they are losing money, but they're getting it back on like the other premiums, like the bank fees, all the nickel and dime stuff. But like, oh yeah, rates are up, so you just pay more, right? Like it just, and over the arc of the plan, like they know those fixed products will come back in line, and for a while those fixed products were more expensive than the variable money, so they're all fine, and we're all okay with that. We say, we don't want our landlord being okay. We don't want that, but we're really okay with BMO and Scotiabank and CIBC. We're really okay with them being good, and we're okay with like the government being good. We want to make sure the government and the banks have all their money, but it's the landlord that we really need to make sure that they feel the squeeze. Like that doesn't seem to make sense to me, but this is how brainwashed we are. We're totally
This is-
okay with these other groups, making all this money.
All right, no more whining. I'm over it. We've already bitched about this 1,000 times over. I'm also, I feel the exact same. I'm just like, whatever. On the flip side, Mark Kenny, CEO of CapREIT, has made an announcement. This is on Business Vancouver. I saw this article, and I thought it was kind of interesting because we've talked about this a bunch, but he thinks a affordable housing solution is right in front of us that can be done fairly quickly, and that's manufactured housing. And it made me kind of think about
What is it, Boxable?
the boys at Boxable.
Yeah.
And he's basically saying like CapREIT just bought a bunch of parks off Killam there. They made that like swap for
Mhm.
apartment buildings, and they bought some trailer parks simply because, or mobile home parks, simply because I think Killam was getting into some like anti-competitiveness because they owned pretty much all the mobile home parks in Canada, and so they had to sell them.
Really?
Yeah, so CapREIT ended up buying them up, but he's saying that 1% of Canadian homes are in manufactured home parks. It's a missed opportunity for governments trying to encourage affordable housing. There's a ton of land, and the zoning doesn't need to be heavily dense.
Mhm.
And additionally, he's like, honestly, people can get in there and have a home for $500 a month.
Also, you don't get pillaged on the infrastructure costs because you effectively do it like a private lane. So you don't have to
Yep.
build to like, Department of Transportation road quality, and not every single person needs, like you can do basically shared utilities and all of these things. There's some economics there, but it's like everything else. We stigmatized it, and a lot of
Yep.
people are like, oh, well, I'm too good for that. Blah, blah. You go in these units, they're gorgeous.
Yeah.
Right? You can get like a 1,300 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, vaulted ceiling, mini home, and they're lovely. So there's definitely something there. We just need to change
And
our
they've come a
mindset.
long way. I think that when they went, like back in the day, they were built so cheap and poorly that they were falling apart, and they were like not great units. And now, like you said, the new ones are beautiful units. They're like much more, like they're actually better built a lot of times than homes that are built outside,
Yeah,
right?
so built
Because
in a factory.
they're built in a
Yeah.
factory. It's the same consistency every single time. There's two big problems, obviously, is no mortgages, or not big mortgages usually, simply because they're not fixed.
Mhm.
The new ones will give you mortgages, but then they start to, as they get older, they won't be able to remortgage them.
Yeah, but a lot of those changed. It used to be that a lot of lenders wouldn't let you amortize past 40 years because that was considered the engineering life of the
Yep.
unit. But now that's no longer the case, and you see these units still getting financed well beyond their 40-year lifespan.
The other thing that's interesting is I think a lot of the parks went up. I didn't get a chance to look into this, but I think a lot of parks in Canada went up in the same sort of period where we were having a housing crisis. I don't know, it was the 70s or 80s, and they built a ton of parks super, super quickly, and it did
Interesting.
actually offer a ton of housing, and so it might actually be an interesting opportunity to do so. But again, it's the same concept. I think if any time housing gets built rapidly, it's going to end up ultimately, I think, being great right now, and then taking a turn downwards because people don't end up maintaining it, and it was built so quickly. There's a lot of things that get overlooked. It's the same with, you look at like the north of Halifax, like we said, all those military houses that went up super fast. At first, they were amazing. Then for 20 years, they were in the dumps because no one really paid much attention to them. They weren't necessarily the flashy thing, whatever. And now they've come full circle, and now they are the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you probably again have that same life cycle with these, but as a temporary solution, I think it could be interesting. And I don't know. Again, the manufactured housing is a big part that excited me when I just reminded me of Boxable and watching their clips and seeing where things are going there. And the other suggestion here was the difference now is everyone can work anywhere.
Yep.
So there's an opportunity to put these all over the place, and people can be working remote. And there seems to be a larger shift towards that as we're going here.
There's also like you can now model the parks that have had success and that are popular. Like we have one here called Timber Trails, and they sort of geared it more towards senior living, and it was it's always been the most sought after park community, in the city.
Yep.
But also the way
It can
they
be hard to
laid-
get into.
very hard. They also the way they laid out the community. These straightforward lines with a trail around the back, like a walking trail. A little bit larger lots, left a lot of original trees. Like it's just aesthetically a lovely park.
Yeah.
And they set up the community in the proper way. You'd have to think that people now with some savvy planning could do a similar thing where you even have like a little commercial plaza at the front or something and do these communities and do them really well. But the challenge too is where do you find the land that amount of density actually makes sense, right? As opposed to stacking high. Right, so you have to go to these outside areas, and because all these costs have inflated, the land costs have inflated too, and it's very.
It's also
difficult.
getting approvals. I think a lot of communities don't want to accept them simply because they've been stigmatized.
That's
Because I was thinking
very,
that right
very,
now.
very
There's
true.
a piece of land next to me, and I was like, "Oh, that would actually be a really good spot to put it." And I'm like, I know that my neighborhood would come with pitchforks
Oh yeah,
to
Yeah.
the council hearing of being
Yeah.
like, "This is not happening here. There's
Yeah.
no chance." On that same note of working remotely and how these could make more sense, Apple Vision Pro. We're not a tech podcast, but
I remember you sent this to me. You're like, "Here we go, it's happening." It's like we've been talking about this for 2 years and it has not happened.
and now it's happening. I'm telling you, no one was doing it really well, and that's what it takes. It takes a company to properly bring it to market where it works flawlessly. You're going to be wearing it. I can already, like, you were like, I'll never put this headset on. You were going to have an Apple Vision Pro strapped to your dome. I already know it. You're going to walk in
You
here
had to go with my iPhone and my iPad that I
Dude.
also don't have.
looking bug-eyed. Yeah, whatever. You're going to have a BlackBerry Vision blurry, but like it's going to be amazing. So did you watch the video or anything?
No.
I'm sure Mark has. Yeah. It's, of course, everyone knows what a VR headset is. Theirs is fully glass in the front. So the idea is you can still see out. Like it basically makes it interactive with your environment.
Okay.
And so you're not like losing kind of, because that was a big thing. Like once you close yourself off, it feels like you're in another space. You know what
You're
I mean?
in a video
And
game.
yeah, it's a video game and it's uncomfortable. And like, to be honest with you, it's kind of anxiety inducing, like to be strapped in there. I haven't watched a ton on it. I just watched the first video, but like they're like simply you can look at a screen and it'll operate the screen like any with Apple products. So like you look at your laptop and you don't have to touch your laptop. It'll start running and operating your laptop. And you can bring that screen up and then you can expand the screen like just in front of you using your hands and your motions and your eyes. And it picks it all up and like you can click on things and interact with stuff with your eyes. Like it's gonna be insane. It's gonna change the game completely. Like I guarantee you tons of people are gonna be wearing these and it's gonna make more sense, man. Like, and the two things I thought of, I'm like, well, first of all, with real estate, like I said, this makes total sense for showings because like there's gonna be cameras that go along with this. You're gonna be able to walk through and interact with the space in a showing without having to go to it. So why in the world would you drive there and do all that? The second thing is for me, and I think it more important is, again, as we are continuing to go down a path of like more and more people are living in small spaces, you're not going to give a shit because you really don't need all that space because you can do everything within the virtual world. You're really not even going to necessarily care about the space that you're in as much. And I know I'm not saying that that's a good thing, but I do see society going there. I think even right now, the reason people can pallet smaller spaces is we have so much technology.
But
so
I
you're
think
able to
then-
disconnect from the world and do stuff. I'm not saying it's good, but I do think this is where it's going.
But this like it's all just placating the need for the thing, but like let's find a way to pretend that we give it to you, not actually give it to you, which is sort of like I think we actually
Metaverse.
need a major shift in thinking and what we want and don't want. Basically, you're saying like, oh, you can live actually in a small space, but you can still pretend to have a big sprawling place. Like I saw
Yeah.
this great post where apparently Canadians have almost the biggest houses in the world.
Believe that.
Or like top 3, like biggest houses
US is
in the
probably
world.
the biggest.
Because we want these 5-bedroom houses and blah blah blah.
Mhm.
We need to change that thinking. We don't need to be able
That's
to
not
like
gonna change.
live in a cubby and put on a VR set that still imagines we're in a 5-bedroom
That's not going
house.
to change though. That's not going to change. Our whole society is like built on the idea and like constantly chasing the dream. We will always be fed the dream to keep us churning. Like if you took away that idea, if people weren't fed the idea of like more luxurious crap, bigger things, all this garbage, like the whole economy here is going to stop because everyone's not going to be fired up to keep working, right? Like this again, I talked about Costa Rica, when you go to Costa Rica, they're not necessarily fed that bullshit, and so they don't really care. They're not like I'm not.
So
I'm not,
we
they're
need
not
to figure out
obsessed with
why we're
chasing
being
money.
fed this bullshit. Like,
It
we have
keeps
to
the
find,
economy churning, man.
Yeah.
You're not like again, it's the same concept. Like it's a benefit to the government to, and in like this is like conspiracy shit, but like it's a benefit to the government to have people chasing money. Like that's what they want you to do. This
Yeah.
is also going to
Yeah,
increase
yeah,
the amount of
totally.
workable hours because it's going to get
Yeah.
to the point where people are working like
And we need
daytime
innovation, and
jobs
we
and
need these
evening
things,
jobs.
and we want to do all these things to better our lives.
If you look at the
in
amount of
theory.
working hours now, every single person has a side hustle. Like you can no longer live without a side hustle. Everyone's like, I work this and then I do something on the side. If you just work a single job, it's impossible to get ahead. Like literally, it's gotten to the point now where okay, now we're adding in multiple jobs, and that's what they want. Like a country to run a country, to increase your GDP, to increase the strength of your country, you need your people to produce more. That's what it is.
Or you need more people, which is what the approach we take.
It wouldn't.
We actually, as individuals, aren't producing more in Canada. We're arguably producing less.
Yeah, and we're trying to
So
spread
we
it
just
across
bring in
more people.
Yeah.
But again, you need to have more people churning to make more money. So all to say that
Only because the government continues to need more money.
totally, but
Right.
that's world economics. That's like that's never going to change. And if you're in a country that's jousting to be in those top countries, that's part of it. Like you have to be behind your country and be a part of that. Like Chinese mentality, right? Like that's it's the same idea, and that's why a lot of people are very proud to work hard in the country because it's a part of the greater good of making their country stronger on a world stage, right? All to go back to, I think that people keep getting fed that will never change. Like again, that's like government wants that like the mentality is they want to praise the big, the rich, the powerful because they want everyone to be chasing that,
Right.
and all that to say that it's getting to a point now where the gap's too hard to achieve, and so things like VR and technology are going to allow us to be pacified and to still enjoy these things.
This is also, not to
you
come
can
back to
stimulate your
this, but this is
system.
why the government, I don't think, has really wants affordable housing because they make more money off of big, expensive houses. They just do, and big, flashy projects and all these things.
And affordable housing,
So that's why they're going to have such a trouble with it because it doesn't put any money in their pocket.
yeah, and again, affordable housing on average, the people that need to live there need it to be affordable. They're also not churning the amount of money that is beneficial. Like again, the government is going to put more value on someone who churns big dollars than doesn't. It's just that simple. Because they're more valuable to them. Like if you're a government,
Only because they can take more and then bring them back down to where the other people are anyway.
yeah, and but if you're a government, like why do you need to run? Like how do you keep this thing going? And so yeah, you're going to put more weight on the people that are like making tons of money for you. Right. So, anyways, I thought it was neat. The Apple Vision Pro. I genuinely think I've been screaming on here for years now that VR is gonna be a thing, and it's totally gonna happen. And I see. The other thing, right off the hop, I was like, I hope this is where it starts, or I was at the dentist when it came out, and I was like, it'd be so nice right now to just be wearing that stupid thing. I could be still doing my work. I could still be doing my emails, or I could just watch a video. Because they're just like grinding away at my teeth.
Yeah, guys just like watching porn while they're in the dentist chair.
I also was considering that for a second. I was like, there's gonna be so much weird shit that
We're
comes
gonna
from
need a
this.
weighted blanket over here. I'll fill in this cavity.
But it's gonna come in. I think that's where you'll see it first because it is like $5,000 or $6,000, which is like sounds crazy, but cell phones now are like a full spec iPhone's like $2,500, I think. Or maybe $3,000 now.
Jesus.
So it's like, it's not that outlandish. Additionally, Apple's got financing in their own banking system now. So everything's going to be financed. The other thing is with tech, I've seen when I was like, tech's a really great thing to finance because they can literally just find it or they can just shut you down. It's like, oh, go ahead. Don't pay your financing contract on your phone.
Yeah.
Whoop, and you're like, ah, shit. Right? Like you don't pay your finance contract on the
This is
car.
what we need to
They have to
develop
try
for
and track the
landlords.
car down. And then, and like, depending on the car, some of them they put trackers in now and so they can find them. But like a lot, like you can finance furniture and this and that, and all they can do is dummy your credit. Like they're never going to find that couch, and they can't take it back. They can't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But technology, they can. So you're going to get to the point where everyone finances it. But I think off the hop, you're going to see it with businesses like using it. Like I was thinking that even like at the barbershop, you could like, well, it needs a head wrap on the back, but there's so many places that you can wear. The one that they put in their video was on an airplane.
Yeah.
That actually made a lot of sense to me because I'm like sitting in those seats for anytime over 3
why would you
hours.
even bother flying anywhere? You could just pretend you're there anyway.
Well, there's that aspect. And then if you do have to fly, like anytime, it's over 3 hours, it's pretty much sucks. And so now you just throw this on, like you could be doing all your stuff. I don't know. I
won't
think, and
be
I
there.
think it's how is it going to impact the real estate market is my thing. Is there going to be more people that are comfortable going into smaller spaces? Is there going to be less desire to have all the homes and like be chasing that kind of a dream now?
Yeah.
Like, are people still going to have that desire when it's like you literally wear this thing all day and again, you can, yeah, exactly. Everything's perfect. You can capture your reality, like whatever reality you want. You can make it you can make any
I just
reality
think
you
that's
want
so
in
bad
your real
for
life.
society. But
It is,
anyway.
but so are cell phones. So is TV. So is all this tech. It's all been bad. Like there's been some improvements, but as a whole, the average person's time is just getting sucked by these things.
Yeah.
I see my average screen time every week. It's like 6.5 hours, and I'm like aggressively trying not to use my phone. It used to be when I was working a lot, 8.5, 9 hours.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Easy. Yeah. Okay, we gotta wrap
Anyways,
this up.
That's my rant on the Vision Pro. It's gonna be sick. We're gonna get a video of Chandler wearing it.
Yeah, would love to hear you guys' thoughts on the interest rate stuff and how you're feeling it, personally, and what your thoughts are. I mean, we've thrown out some ideas here that are maybe not going to be super popular and maybe everyone won't agree with. That's fine. Fire your comments. Let us know what you think. But
100%. Thanks for listening, guys.
Thanks so much for watching the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. Don't forget to subscribe. But also check us out on Instagram and TikTok. You can find all the links below. Thanks again for checking us out.
Broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich habits.